I too have been to some academic presentations, and I've even given a few myself. This is a visual representation of this here. And that got me thinking, can I give an accurate representation of an academic presentation, including as many tropes as possible, by giving what appears to be an academic presentation? Now, you may not have noticed, but I paused just then. That was to give the impression that the question that I was about to pose was actually more important than it is. So, for the past week or so, I've been writing this talk, and that got me thinking as well of a secondary question that I was also interested in testing. That is, can I make my talk interesting? Now, this question and my overall topic is interesting because I'm saying that it is in a way that makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about. So I hope you'll agree. Okay, so now I'll rush through my experimental design. This is likely to include lots of complex processes and jargon that I won't bother explaining. And at this point, I may already be starting to lose some of your attention. So, in very, very simple terms, what I did was I thought what I was going to say, and then I wrote this up, and I made it into a presentation, and then I needed to actually give the presentation itself. Now, I'm still currently working on the final part of my experiment, so I won't have any concrete data to give you in this talk at the moment. As for my secondary question, I decided to use laughing as a proxy for interest, but I needed to test the reliability of this proxy. So I've designed this survey, so if near the end of the talk you could just carry out this survey in your minds, that should help me decide. Okay, now I have this video of part of my experimental design. Now, this is to help you understand my methods a bit better. Well, at least that's what I told myself. It's more just sort of fill some time. So I'll just try and get this video to work now. I'll spend at least 10 seconds on this. I'll also audibly mutter something like, "Come on, you stupid thing," in order to fill the crushingly awkward silence that arises the longer the video doesn't play.
The event host will come and try and figure out the thing with you.
Oh, oops. Okay, so in reality the video was never going to play, and I'll eventually give up whilst admitting that it wasn't that interesting or informative anyway, which will leave you to wonder why I included it in the first place. Okay, so by now most of you will have completely lost interest in what I'm saying and started daydreaming. You might be thinking about that piece of work that you need to finish, or what you're going to have for dinner tonight, or maybe even how exactly do they pit olives. For the rest of you, whether you're paying attention depends almost completely on how well we know each other. If we're really friendly, you might just be hanging on out of courtesy. But if we don't know each other very well, I'll almost certainly have lost your attention. I can see this happening, but I don't care, because now that I'm up here, I just want to get to the end of my talk. Okay, so on to my results now, and even I'm starting to lose interest in what I'm saying. So you see that I've thrown up all of these complicated looking figures. I won't bother to help you to understand them, because what's most likely to have happened is that my supervisor helped me with all of these analyses, and I barely understand them myself. So instead what I'll do is I'll just sort of vaguely point to one of the results and tell you that it confirms my hypothesis. I'm saying it with confidence so that you'll just believe that I'm correct. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the results pertaining to my first question are inconclusive, as unfortunately I haven't quite finished giving my presentation. So this was somewhat expected though, so I'm not too worried about these results just yet. I do have some preliminary data though, which suggests that yes, I can give an academic presentation, as there seems to be this trend towards me completing the talk that I'm currently giving. So what I'll do in the future is continue with my talk, and hopefully this should give me some clearer results in about a minute from now. For my second question, yeah, I wanted to test whether laughter meant that you were interested. So I hope that you can see from your own experience that there is an affirmative answer to this question. However, some of you have laughed during this talk, but whether this number is significant and what this laughter actually means, I'm yet to determine. So, in summary, the data appear to show that I can give an academic presentation, but as I mentioned, I'm not quite finished with my talk yet, so these results are still inconclusive. I might know in about 30 seconds from now. It should be clear that by this point, you can tell that I'm just taking cues from watching the screen. I'm pretty much limping towards the end of my talk, and I only care about finishing it now. What was the next slide? Oh yeah. Was my talk interesting? Well, my talk did elicit some laughs from the audience, but whether this laughter actually means that you were interested is slightly beyond the scope of my study. It's also unclear whether or not I've just been making you nervous. Finally, I will end with an insincere statement of my gratitude, but one that is obligatory for when you give a talk. Thank you.
Any dance to finish it off, Callum?
I'm going to compliment you for the work you've done, even if I'm not really interested, and I'm going to ask the audience if anyone has got any relevant question.
Oh,
they're
sure.
going to ask something they probably already said, but they were not paying enough attention.
Do you have any way in future presentations of quantifying nervousness?
So, I'll repeat your question back to you, because I'm stalling, as I haven't really understood what you've asked me. I'll then give an answer. I'll sort of go back to somewhere else in my talk that you weren't referring to, and I will basically just read again and give that as my answer to your question. So I hope that answers your question, but I don't actually care if it has.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is not really a question. This is more me just, really liking the sound of my own voice, and I really want to be in front of this audience. So I'm just gonna say some really complicated stuff in the hopes to gain my peers' approval. But it's not really a question, so don't really assume that you will answer.
And I'm silently hating you for asking such a complicated question that we both know you don't actually care about the answer, you just want it to sound smart. But I'll try my best at answering and give an equally gibberish answer.
At this point, I will try and diffuse the ongoing argument. You did an incredible job at this, even if I really haven't really looked at it, because I was too. I was spending too much time on my phone anyway. And so, yes, thank you to Callum anyway.
Thank you.